Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it. Welcome back, everyone. For this week's episode, I actually want to talk about suicide awareness. Being September is Suicide Awareness Month or suicide prevention. I want to talk about mental health. I want to kind of take on the uncomfortable here and talk about something that I feel like we rarely actually talk about, and that's mental health. And I feel like, especially when you talk about in farmers and ranchers and the ag sector in general, I feel like it's probably pretty common to deal with the mental health issues, but we just don't talk about it much. And so that's kind of why I want to talk about this on this week's episode. And I want to do the best I can to kind of convey this message. Just a forewarning, I do not have much of an outline here. I'm just kind of winging this and speaking from just something that comes to my mind, something that comes to heart. I just want to talk about this a little bit more. And also, I talk about when it comes to like suicide in farming, and especially like the ag industry, I think that's very high because we are very isolated. We're in rural, and I feel like we got this stipulation around us that we can't necessarily share a lot with others. We're trying to be the strong ones here, and ultimately that can lead to some really strong mental health issues. But to take this one step further, and I'll kind of elaborate on this a little bit more, is I think this is also very common in entrepreneurs. And that, I think, as an entrepreneur, you are trying to start a business. You are taking a lot of weight on your shoulders. You are maybe stepping back from, say, the comfortable of taking on just working at a job and getting a salary and kind of a more, say, comfortable life. You are taking on more risk, and which also can lead to definitely some stronger stories and some stronger issues there when it comes to our mental health. So I think those two kind of go hand in hand, because basically as farmers, as ranchers, as business owners, ag business owners, we are entrepreneurs. And so that's the act of basically taking on your own business, taking on risk. And I think that's where some of that comes from, in my opinion. And so just to kind of share a little bit about my experiences, I think it's all very common that we know of somebody that maybe not somebody close, but we say somebody in the community that actually went through with the act of committing suicide, and it's obviously very sad. Or maybe we are actually somebody that are very close to somebody that has, say, a sibling or say a relative that has gone through with this. Or let's be honest here. Maybe you personally, the one listening to this with AirPods in, riding around in your tractor, are struggling with some issues yourself. Well, let's just kind of talk about this, and we'll kind of go through some of this. When it comes to some things I was thinking about, is so me personally, I was trying to think about what are my experiences with this. Well, I guess, when I was actually in high school, I had a friend of mine, not necessarily real close, but kind of a friend that I knew through 4-H, through showing livestock. It was from a different town. This friend of mine in high school, he actually committed suicide. And so that was kind of something that I was aware of from early on. And it was something that I always knew was there. And so that was definitely hard when you're young, because you really don't understand it all. Even being in high school, I didn't understand it, and I had no idea what this guy was dealing with. And so I feel like especially when it comes to mental health issues as a kid, maybe a teenager, early adulthood, that's a whole different ballgame, because this world is so cruel, to be honest. And there's just so much stuff that we have to deal with, and it can be hard to relate. Definitely can be hard to relate, especially if you've got, maybe kids that are getting close to that age. It's hard to protect them from some of these things that we deal with in this life, in the world around us. And especially when it comes to social media, man, it's a whole different ballgame there. I'm not even going to necessarily touch on, but It's so hard to prevent from dealing with some of these challenges that we as kids are going to be facing. No matter what, they're going to be facing it. I guess as long as you can maybe try to give them an outlet to share openly, that's a good start there, especially when it comes to, like I said, youth or young adulthood. That's a good start there. But that's just to share kind of my experience, or kind of something that I remember from early on. I remember getting that call saying that this guy did what he did, and it was just definitely affects you from an early on. And then obviously when you go through life, you hear of different stories that different people that actually go through it. And the one thing there that I will mention is, man, you hear about the ones that actually go through with it, but how many people have not actually gone through it, actual act of committing the suicide, but have had the thought in their head, that have had the thought of, this life just fucking sucks. Excuse my language there, but come on. That's what we're thinking about. That's just it's a really hard thought to think about, and that's why I feel like we struggle with this, is because it's really hard for us to openly admit that. And it's nothing that we talk about this. We keep it buried down deep because for whatever reason, we're maybe taught, trained, or conditioned, or we want to be strong, we want to appear to be strong, and we just don't openly admit this. And I suppose, especially when it comes to, I mentioned, as we get older in life, this is just definitely things that, as we're going through life, and life just sucks sometimes, and it's hard for us to admit that we are having some pretty negative thoughts. And so that was kind of some different things. And I want to talk about also when I was definitely younger, you talked about people that you heard of them suffering from, say, depression. That's kind of when I think of mental health, I think of depression. And then from there, that's where it can kind of go down the road of escalating, essentially, to where, negative thoughts come into head where you essentially don't want to be here anymore. But I think of depression first when it comes to mental health. And I think in that regard, I always actually thought I had somebody in our family, relative, that was dealing with depression. And I was honestly under the impression that that is something that is a weakness. Truly on, this was my early, probably 8, 9, 10 years ago. That was my thoughts about it. And I was like, if you can't deal with your own thoughts, what kind of person are you? You should be able to deal with that, put those thoughts out of your head, realize the things that you have to be grateful for, yada, yada, yada. Not realizing that this is an actual illness or disease or thing that we all struggle with. And so that's definitely kind of my philosophy or thoughts that, back in the day, and obviously that has changed. That has changed significantly. Also, it's changed because I have gone through a lot of hardships. And I'd say it's pretty easy for somebody to have that thought process of, you should be able to work through this, or depression, that you shouldn't have to deal with that. That's probably somebody that hasn't honestly gone through a hard time or hasn't gone through some thick shit. So, that was where I was back in the day. I really hadn't gone through much. Well, and as life progresses, we're always going to go through something. We're always going to go through our own struggles and challenges. So to share just, a little bit about some of the struggles and challenges that I went through, and I guess that I'm not meaning to put weight on these compared to maybe some of the challenges that you or somebody else that might be going through, but just to kind of share my experience here is, like I said, back in 2016, for those that you didn't know, we expanded our cow herd and we built a hoop building. We took on a lot of debt, yada, yada. If you know that story, you kind of know where that all went. But in that hard times of taking on debt, going through struggles with the bank and trying to figure out how we're going to pay back all this debt, it got to be pretty dark to where I'm fifth generation on our farm. And we were looking at some growing debt, going to the bank and literally trying to figure out how we were going to survive. We went to some meetings to some farm crisis. We called that hotline that you feel like only those who are very desperate actually go through and call, because we don't need that. We're stronger than that. We can work through our struggles. Well, I'll admit it. We called them. We went through that process and tried to meet with some people to help us out. And in those times, man, I just felt like a broken man. I felt like I should be better than this. I put that weight on myself. At the time, I had a wife, and we had our first son, Kip, at the time. And I put this weight on my shoulders that I need to be able to deal with this. And I wasn't. I was struggling heavily. And not saying that I was necessarily having negative thoughts of, suicide like we're talking about here. I wasn't necessarily to that point. I always found hope in trying to get through it, to be honest. found a lot of strength from Ellen, my wife, and to really get through the challenges. But I will not lie. There was a lot of sleepless nights where you just laid there in bed and just thinking to yourself, man, is this really worth it? What are we doing? Or what are we going to do? And how are we going to survive this? Are we going to be able to get through this? Really negative thoughts is when you talk about a fifth generation farm, and I live in the house that my great grandpa built, and thinking about, are we going to literally lose the house that we live in? I feel like your thoughts always tend to take control when you go to the negative right away, and they just run. And so that's usually what happens. But let's just talk about it here. That's usually where our thoughts go. And so that's kind of where I was dealing with some struggles that I was dealing with. And it's pretty easy in those different circumstances to maybe hit the bottle, maybe take to drugs or alcohol or anything like that to sedate those issues. But at the end of the day, it did take them away. And that was really the reason why I didn't necessarily fall into some of those habits, is because I just wanted the pain to go away. I just wanted the pain to go away. And I knew at the end of the day that, that wasn't going to do it. Going out and having a hell of a time with the boys and getting hammered, and that wasn't going to take the pain away. And to be honest, a little side story there, when you had young kids that didn't sleep very good at night or always going to get up, I knew that it was actually that pain was going to be worse dealing with a hangover and a young child. So I guess I, for whatever reason, did not go that route. But going back to the concept of just take the pain away, I feel like that's where some of these stories start to creep in. Of, like I said, what happens if I just take the pain away? To get real thick and heavy here, that's the struggles and the stories that we ultimately deal with. Like I said, I never did necessarily think about the ultimate fact of taking the pain away. But I won't lie that, say you're driving down the road 60, 70 miles an hour, maybe you're on a semi, and you just think to yourself, what would happen if it just took her to hard right into the ditch, steep ditch, driving through some hills? What would happen? That was just some very negative thoughts that might have come through your head from time to time. And they didn't necessarily hold any weight, didn't hold any merit, didn't really put any much thought into it. But I feel like we can all admit when one time or another in our lives, when we went through some struggles and when you're going through the thick of things, when you're going through some shit, that we've maybe had those thoughts at one point or another. And so I just wanted to get on here and openly admit that those are some of the things that I went through. And so those were some of the struggles that I dealt with. Now, I mean, those times I was to a certain extent past. We've had better times, but that's not to mention that, there's always going to be difficult times in the future. And there's always going to be times to where, we're still just going through some different things to where you're going to be struggling. And that's where I kind of want to lead into is this trifecta of insanity. So what this essentially is your marriage, your kids, and your business. Those three. Those are kind of a trifecta of insanity. Can you imagine all the struggles that we can deal with? One, in marriage, trying to keep your marriage on point with your spouse and trying to maintain that relationship. Then also your kids. Throw kids into the mix. I'm a father, and we've got young kids, and maybe the sleepless nights, maybe the fussy kids, maybe the kids that are constantly yelling, not listening. But then also within that, how you're parenting and how you're showing up for your children and how you react. Maybe you might be blow up from time to time, and then you're really hard on yourself. So that's definitely a hard one there. And then the last one is obviously business. The business there is going to probably take the most weight, because I just feel like that's, like I said, as entrepreneurs, as farmers, ranchers, ag business owners, that's where we tend to struggle the most, to where we're just putting this weight on our shoulders, to where we have these growing debt load where we've got to pay our bills and support our family and come home at night and try to be strong for them and throw out the weight that's on our shoulders, that 50-pound, maybe even 100-pound feed sack. That's the struggles that we dealt with that day. Throw that off when we walk into the door, so that way we can be ever present for our wife and our kids and our spouse. And I just feel like there's just so much weight there. And I hope you can feel the passion that comes through this microphone, because I talk about this because this is everything that we deal with. And so I think it's very important to talk about this and just to be open about it, to be open about this. And so this is just so common for And I say husbands because, obviously I'm a husband, I'm a father, but it's the same thing for wives and mothers and everything that you guys do on your home front. You got to support your husband, and you got to support your family, and there's so much struggles that you can deal with as well. And I feel like you tend to hear probably more about the men that actually go through with this, but I guarantee there's just as many women out there that have struggled with mental health issues as well. And so to kind of keep on moving here, after I've kind of gotten on that soapbox, some things that maybe we can look at doing. What can we do is for those that maybe struggle, I'm sure there's people that are listening to this that have struggled at one point or another. Maybe it's those stories are getting louder. Maybe at the current moment, they're not very loud, but in the future, they could be. So just what can we do? Well, I want to say this, and I truly mean this, and I'm not just trying to say it to put it out there to be cheesy, but I do believe that you who's listening to this, no matter what your story is, God put you here for a reason. Now, obviously, we usually don't know what that reason is. We don't necessarily know why he put us here. Sometimes we question whether it's worth being here, whether we're just getting in the way, whether we should basically take away the pain. But God put you here for a reason. And that is a fact. That's a fact. God put you here for a reason. Truly believe that. And so I really hope that you believe it as well. That's one thing that I can't reiterate enough or just stress enough, because it's true. So God put you here for a reason, and you have value and purpose. You have value and purpose. No matter what, if you have a hard time finding it, and that is truly the thing about life, is it's hard to necessarily sometimes find our purpose and feel like we have value in this world, but you do. Let's just face it, you do. You have value and you have purpose. Now, the other thing here is I want to say there is true strength in being willing to admit, I am not okay. True strength in that. And I really like that, I am not okay. And a side reference here, if you've not heard Jelly Roll's song, I Am Not Okay, please go check it out. Even if you're in a good mental health state and you're in the best state of mind, go check out that song. That's a great song that just came out here, and it's by Jelly Roll, I Am Not Okay. And I think there's true strength in just being able to openly admit, I am not okay. And from there, maybe you can actually take some action and maybe seek some help or kind of figure out what your next steps are going to be. But just if you've had any sort of thoughts in your head, be willing, find the strength to just admit, I am not okay. And so from there, I'd say for those, maybe if you're not necessarily dealing with this, but you just want to be a good person to those around you. When it comes to maybe any sort of mental health issues, nobody shares about this stuff. Nobody talks about it. It's always one of those cases to where when somebody actually does commit suicide, you're always like, wow, there was no signs. Just nobody knew about it. Well, no shit, because nobody's willing to talk about it. I feel like if there was somebody that showed signs, to a certain extent, maybe we'd actually be able to intervene. And so nobody's going to actually really know who in this world, who in this crowd of people that we're all amongst is sometimes struggling with this stuff. So in general, you got to be kind of a good friend to everybody. And that's kind of some of the points I want to make here is be a friend. To kind of take it one step back real quick is I feel like as a society and as a generation, kind of our current generation that is super connected by this thing that we hold in our hand that's in our pocket that we can get out and call almost anybody in the world. We're super connected, but we're also very isolated because we're on the other side of that. And sometimes that causes us to feel alone. And not to mention, going back to the agriculture and we live in a rural area, it's pretty easy to get isolated there as well. So kind of to keep moving here, I'd say be a friend. That's a good one there. Be a friend. Be kind. Be kind always for lots of reasons. And also be vulnerable. Be vulnerable and willing to openly admit, openly share about your own struggles. Be vulnerable and maybe sometimes throwing yourself under the bus to get conversations started and just to show that you're willing to listen to other people and whatnot. So that's just kind of some things there that kind of came to mind for me. Obviously, I'm not necessarily a therapist or a psychiatrist to give you some perfect advice to go and handle these situations, but I'd say for me, just speaking as an honest man, those are things that kind of come up for me. And so as we get to wrapping this up, I really do hope that, whoever's listening to this finds value in it. And that's why I was just wanting to jump on here and kind of share my situation and share my thoughts. And so I hope that people have resonated with this conversation and found value in it. And just be willing to talk about the things that are uncomfortable. And that's one thing that I'm willing to do here on Pioneer Pharma as best that I can, is try to be willing to talk about the things that are uncomfortable. So that's all I got for now, and we will catch you next time. Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram @GarrettRuskamp or on Facebook, and join me next time for more conviction through clarity.